Hello, my name is Joe, and welcome to my channel. You know, guys, RWBY is my favorite show that's still currently airing. Sure, there are shows I liked more when they were on, and there are shows that I get more hyped over now, but RWBY is the show that keeps me the most consistently invested in it. I mean, it makes sense, right? It'd be pretty weird to make so many videos about a show that I don't like, right? But in spite of that, it's not like I consider it a perfect show. There are definitely some things I take issue with, but I prefer to generally focus on the positives. Because, as CinemaWin says, liking things is more fun. However, at times, it can be good to give criticism. So today, I decided to talk about what my problems are with Oscar Pine. Now, before I get into this, just so you know, this video isn't permission for you to shit-talk the writers or Aaron Dismuke in the comments. Yeah, don't be dicks. Now, to really understand my issues with Oscar as a character, there are three main points we really need to address. His personality and general development, his relationships and interactions with others, and his status as the most recent incarnation of Ozma. Starting with his personality, he doesn't really have one? Well, that's not entirely fair. He just doesn't have that much of one. Don't get me wrong. There are moments when Oscar really does shine. Volume 8 in particular has a few of these, such as when he convinced Hazel to switch sides, or his big attack against Salem. These are truly great moments, but they don't really outweigh that most of the time when he's being focused on, he's just really bland. He isn't awkwardly funny like Jean, he isn't energetic like Ruby or Nora. He isn't even intentionally zen and kind of emotionally repressed like Ren is. He's just kind of there. I made a comparison in my tier list video to Giorno Giovanna from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I think that's actually pretty apt here. I won't get into spoilers for that, but for certain reasons, Giorno's personality really has an interesting combination of nobility and gentlemanliness combined with a level of cruelty and ruthlessness. This is really awesome when we get to see it, like in his introductory arc and when Passion fought the notorious B.I.G. But the problem is that most of the time, much like Oscar, we don't see that, and he's just kind of boring and there. This problem goes hand in hand with his interesting character development. He has developed, I'm not going to say that he hasn't, but the development, in my opinion, kinda detracted more than it helped. He's become more sure of himself and resolute in his goals, but that, honestly, is part of what made him pretty boring to watch. He was more interesting when he had more doubt and uncertainty. To go along with that, a lot of his development has happened off-screen, so it doesn't really feel earned. Unlike with characters like Jean or Weiss. Those two, while they are a bit less entertaining than their earlier selves, are still really enjoyable because we saw how their development went and how they grew into these more level-headed people. With Oscar, it's just kind of there. He was uncertain, and now he is certain. He's all good now. Another contributing factor to this general mehness of Oscar's personality is our second main point, his relationships and interactions with the rest of the cast. So, let's address the elephant in the room. Rose Garden. Before I say anything else, let me say this. If you ship Rose Garden, that's fine. For me, it's a bit because of how childish Oscar looks, the same reason I struggle to ship Beacon era RWBY with pretty much anyone, but there's nothing inherently problematic about it so long as you take Ozpin out of the equation. For the most part, at least, but that's a possible topic for another time. My point is, if you ship Rose Garden, that's fine. But goddamn, they have the most boring dynamic in the entire show. I mean, RWBY has a personality. Oscar has a personality, sometimes at least. But pretty much any time they interact, poof, there go their personalities. They turn into just generic supportive figures for one another. And being supportive is great. It doesn't mean that you have to remove their personalities, though. Let's look at RWBY's relationships with two other people in the show, Jean and Weiss. Those two relationships are two of the most mutually supportive dynamics in the entirety of the show, yet their personalities don't suffer for it anytime they talk. Weiss doesn't suddenly become some bland piece of paper character. Jean and RWBY are still able to banter and be entertaining. They're still the characters we've watched for 8 volumes, quirks and all. Oscar and RWBY just bring out the most boring parts of each other. The most personality they've shown in one-on-one interactions have been 1, when they're beating each other up, and 2, in the cringiest scene in the entirety of RWBY. And see, the thing is, this wouldn't be that huge of an issue if it wasn't for RWBY being basically the only member of the main cast Oscar interacts with. He has some interactions with Jean and a bit with the others, but let's be honest, if he's gonna interact with a member of the main cast, it's probably gonna be RWBY, and it's probably gonna be either boring or cringy. Alright, done with that rant for now. Sorry to you Rose Garden shippers who had to endure that. Believe it or not, I don't really take much part in the shipping side of fandoms. Rose Garden it just makes me sad when I see it, either in canon or in fan stuff. But, you know, to each their own. And hey, if it makes you feel any better, I'm pretty sure Rose Garden is actually gonna happen. Based on their scenes together and how Miles is pretty defensive of it whenever it's brought up, I'm fairly confident that's the direction they're going, as much as I am really not a fan of it. Beyond RWBY and his boring interactions, he's pretty much the same with the most of the main cast. He has kind of a fun dynamic with Jean, and Nora is cute with how she essentially adopted him, but beyond that, it's really more of the same. This kind of bland dynamic was fine with Ozpin, taking the role of the mysterious mentor figure that he did, but with someone who is supposed to be a peer to these people, it's a lot less forgivable. Interestingly, Oscar's most entertaining interactions were in Volume 8, with the villains. Oscar's attempted game of cat and mouse with Salem when they first met was extremely fun to watch, even more than it would have been if it had been Oz and Salem. And the interactions he has with Hazel and Emerald are probably the best he's had with any character in the entire show thus far, able to showcase both his maturity while still retaining an interesting level of vulnerability and youthful feeling. There is one other person Oscar's had a very deep relationship with, of course, and that brings us to our final point. Oscar as the latest incarnation of Ozma. The story of Ozma and Salem, and thus the story of Oscar's origin, is one of the most interesting in the entire show. There's a reason Lost Fable was such a popular episode when it came out. Similarly, Oscar being a reincarnation of this ancient wizard destined to have his soul subsumed into another part of Oz is one of the most interesting and tragic concepts presented thus far in RWBY. and definitely the most interesting aspect of Oscar's character. It also has virtually no chance of actually happening. Anytime it's brought up, I really don't care that much, aside from feeling mildly sympathetic to Oscar's sadness, because from the moment the concept was introduced, I immediately thought, oh, they'll make it so that doesn't happen by the end. It just has always seemed like an obvious move to me. Why? Because it isn't the emotional crux of the series. RWBY's relationship with their families, the mystery of Summer Rose, RWBY's relationship with each other and their friends, the relationship between RWBY, Jean, and Cinder, all of these have a higher level of importance on the scale of emotional foci for the show. It's important, don't get me wrong, but it's mostly important to Oscar, a single character. With that level of importance, it's an easy way to manipulate your audience's emotions. Present this important character with a tragic destiny that can't be avoided, have their entire arc build to the payoff of this tragedy, bring the audience along for the ride and build sympathy and sadness for this destiny, then pull the rug out from under them and give the catharsis of the character having a happy ending. It's a good strategy, and one that often works. But when you don't really care that much about the character, and when you see this strategy coming, it really loses most of its impact. Honestly, at this point, I kinda hope the merge actually will happen. Sorry, Oscar. I think that RWBY is at its best when it shocks you. There's a reason the last 2 episodes of Volume 3 are still some of my favorites in the entire series. Cinder getting the full maiden powers, Yang losing an arm, Ozpin and Pyrrha dying, Beacon becoming uninhabitable. All of those things happening in such quick succession, it left me reeling and wanting more. For a while in Volume 8, I started thinking they might actually go in that direction. They might actually have Ozpin and Oscar fuse. But then it turned out that his major attack on Salem, that giant turning point, was just the cane, instead of actually using magic and bringing Oscar closer to being Oz. So my hopes went back down. Honestly, when I decided to make this video, more than anything else, I was glad I'd finally get to talk out my thoughts on Oscar. Because there is a lot to like about his character. Honestly, there are so many characters like him that I do like a lot. Some of my favorite characters from the properties they come from, in fact. And I realized while writing this that Oscar could have been one of those too. In fact, I honestly think that he would have been if he'd been the main character of the show. But I'll cover that in my next video, on what I think would have made Oscar a better character, in my eyes at least. I'll, try not to take so long this time. But hey, those are just my thoughts. What do you think? Agree? Disagree? Think I spent way too long ranting about Rose Garden? Let me know in the comments down below. And, subscribe. I'm trying to do a video every week or two, even if I really haven't been succeeding the last couple months. So, you might find something like. Till next time, safe journeys, my friends.